Yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about the general like dashboards and tracking and stuff. So Laura, first up, like thank you so much for sharing your like more on philplus.info. Like it's been a tremendously useful tool for me already. And I think having many tools like that is very useful for the system as well. Like it leads to better accountability, better transparency, and also data integrity. And so there's like a couple of dashboards that are being worked on. This is the other one that I briefly mentioned. The shout out to Catalin Barra, who's been working on this one. This is part of the digital mob team who received a grant for some aspects of this as well. And so you should see this, for those of you that are looking at this as like an alternate data source to philplus.info. The intent is to have multiple independent sources of data that provide their perspective and view so that together we can work to build agreement on the state of the ecosystem and make sure that we're all sort of like on the same page about progress that's being made and tracking like the right set of metrics. And so a couple of things I want to highlight on this particular dashboard are the following. So the first is, as a community, one of the metrics that we've been anchoring on recently is this concept of like time to data cap. Time to data cap is the idea that like it takes some amount of like time from as a client entering the ecosystem to actually receiving data cap to your address that you can then use to go make deals. It's like the latency that you would incur if you're someone that's actually like interested in leveraging this particular ecosystem, but need to go through the flow, right? Like you need to go understand what's actually happening. So the time to data cap is representative of effectively like when a client makes an application to a notary and like how long it actually takes for the correspondence between that client and that notary to actually get data cap back to the client. So there's a couple of ways in which this happens. Like as I'd mentioned previously in my talk, you can get data cap automatically. So that means like going to like a site like this, where you like log in via your GitHub account and you get 32 gigabytes of data cap almost instantly, right? Like the delta here is like 30 seconds. And if you look at this particular notary, the automated notary here, the amount of people that have gone through this flow is like pretty substantive. So like this is the notary that owns verified.gov.io. Of like the 330-ish clients that have come to this, 200 of them have come to this flow. So for these particular clients, their time to data cap was like 30 seconds, which is not a lot at all. And so I may actually make this full screen as well, so I can share some other parts of it. But yeah, so 30 seconds brings the time down substantively. But for the remaining like data cap applications that are coming through, those are all manual. They're all coming through GitHub. They require like interaction between a notary and a client to actually discuss like aspects of an application. So I think the one that I was like jumping into before was this application, right? So this, again, not to pick on anybody specifically, I just randomly picked this one because it has numbers, but like you can see that there's this GitHub application that came in, like similar to what you just saw on philplus.info. There's like this interaction between a client and notary, and this takes time. And so what we want to do as a community is like track this and ensure that over time we can reduce how long this takes, because ultimately, if like we're measuring ourselves on making Filecoin more productive and making the ecosystem more useful, then bringing this number down means that like clients themselves are able to be unblocked as fast as possible and have the minimal like perceived friction from the actual ecosystem to bring their stuff onto the network. And so this is something that like I've been paying a lot of attention to in our like biweekly calls, and we've also got other data sources that have popped up. I know Andrew Hill, for example, has started tracking some of this stuff as well through a GitHub file that can be downloaded and used by any other dashboard that's being built. So what I'd like to call out is like specifically, you know, if you're interested in getting into this ecosystem, helping build transparency is absolutely one really, really useful way to do it. The foundation will be talking about grants that are available for you if that's the path you want to take pursue, or if you're just already part of Filecoin in some way, such as the case was with the File Drive project. You know, you're probably already intimately familiar with how some of these things work. You should feel free to get started. There's a bunch of data sources that we'd be happy to chat about. And so if you have any questions about like how this was constructed or where you can access some of this data, we're more than happy to chat through it. The other thing that I'd shown earlier in the talk, earlier in this conference, that I'll just briefly highlight again for those of you that have just joined, is part of this flow, like similar to what you saw on philplus.info, where like once you click into like an actual like client, you can see the amount of deals that they've made. which is with the data cap that they've used so far, how they've made their deals, and where those deals are actually going. And this is interesting because as part of the client due diligence process, oftentimes like clients are also sharing information on their data cap usage plan and their like storage onboarding and allocation plan on the network. And so building transparency and auditing on these things over time as we start to construct a better understanding of how data cap actually flows will be very important in like the long-term efficacy of Filecoin Plus as a program. So yeah, a huge shout out to Laura and team. Great shout out to Catalina as well for this dashboard. And I'm really excited to see any more of you that are working on these things. Shout out to Andrew as well, as somebody that kickstarted some of this measurement of time to data cap to begin with. And so yeah, really looking forward to building a more productive program with all of you over the coming months and years.